Welcome to the review for quiz 14. This quiz is on the concepts that we've learned with labor markets. So let's get right into it. Our first problem comes from our multiple choice review problems on Google Drive. It gives us a table. I've seen a couple of these in the last couple of days. Number of workers and output of corn. Remember, this is called a production function. So it's a production function for corn. And the first problem asks about Laura, the price-taking farmer who produces the corn. Gives us a wage rate of $130, and it gives us price per unit of corn for $10. Gives us a production function, as it says, and then it asks, she's currently employing 2 workers. What if she adds a 3rd worker? What happens to her profits? So let's take a step back and let's do our usual process with the numbers that we're given here, and to find the things that we need for the labor market. We need a marginal product. A times the price of the good is going to give us the value of the marginal product of labor. So our marginal product we take just by finding the change in output of corn for each additional worker. It's 30, 28, 21, 15, 10, 4, and 2. We multiply each of those by the price of the good, which, as we see down here, is $10. Just going to do that as a shortcut. So 30 times 10 gives us $300. It's our first VMPL. 280, 210, 150, 100, 40, and 20. Remember, these represent the additional revenue that is brought by each additional worker. So back to our question now. Laura's currently employing 2 workers. What if she adds a 3rd worker? What happens to her profits? Let's add one more column here, the marginal resource cost for each of these workers. The wage tells us that. It's $130 for each additional worker. And we're not adding $130 to itself each time. In other words, it doesn't go 130, then 260, then 390, etc. This is the marginal resource cost. Each additional worker adds an additional $130. And it is, if you're asked, what does this tell us about the structure of this labor market, then we would say that she is, as a wage taker, she's able to hire all the workers she wants for the same wage. That means she's in a perfectly competitive labor market. Okay, so again to our question. She's currently employing 2 workers. If she adds a 3rd worker, we'd say the first worker is costing us $130, bringing revenues of $300. The profit from that worker is the difference between those two. So we haven't done this before, but just because the problem is worded the way it is, let's add a column for profit from that worker, or marginal profit. So the first worker brings us a marginal profit of $170. The next worker brings us, again, costs $130, brings revenue of $280. The difference is $150. Third worker costs $130, brings $210. So the difference is $80. And that gives us what we need for our problem, because we've said if we've added the 3rd worker, and that is one of our options, our profits will increase by $80. And that's our answer there. You can see that if we were to add a 4th worker, we would increase our profits by $20. If we were to add our 5th worker, we would decrease our profits by $30. It costs more than the revenue we gain. So we would stop there, and the profit maximizing quantity of workers to hire is 4. Next, 7, related to that, Laura is the price-taking farmer who produces corn. Her production function is shown on the table. Suppose Laura acquires more land, and as a result, the output that can be produced by any given number of workers doubles. This is kind of like one that we've done in class. We keep the same wage, $130, and the same price per unit of corn, $10. So now to get our new VMPL, we just need to we need to find a new marginal product for each worker. Each worker can produce now twice as much as before. So we're going to double these original productivity values here. 60, 56, 42, 30, 20, 8, and 4. And then times the price of the good, which is still $10 each, that hasn't changed. Gives us our new VMPLs. So 600, 560, 420, 300, 200, 80, and 40. Wage is still 130, so the marginal resource cost stays the same. So we're going to stop when the VMPL drops below the MRC, and that's not till here. And sorry, it doesn't line up terribly well, but let's put our quantity of workers over on the right hand side too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the answer is 5. And therefore our choice here is B. One other extension of this, say that you're asked to graph this situation in number 7. If we were asked to graph number 7 for the firm, I'd probably say sketch a graph, since we're not going to have to match up and plot exact points. Say sketch a graph, you need to know that the axes for the firm graph is quantity of labor and W for wage, that the supply of labor is a horizontal, perfectly elastic line at a wage rate of 130, and the demand for labor can be sketched as just a downward sloping curve. The equilibrium there, which is where we hire, remember originally was at 4 was our profit maximizing quantity at first, and then when we increase productivity, we've shifted the demand for labor to the right, increasing our hiring quantity to 5. The wage hasn't changed, our demand has shifted to the right, and our quantities increased from 4 to 5. Okay, moving on to the free response question, second one on that set that we had in class. Pride Textiles produces and sells towels in a perfectly competitive market. It hires its workers in a perfectly competitive labor market. Assume the market wage rate for workers is $80 per day. First part of the question says, state the conditions necessary for hiring the profit maximizing amount of labor. Let me take you back to the graph that we just had. Best way I think to think about this is at the profit maximizing amount, the supply of labor is equal to the demand for labor, or, remember we used other terms for this, the marginal resource cost, which is equal to the wage, is equal to the value of the marginal product of labor. So the way I would answer this, the AP test would take it a number of different ways, is that at the profit maximizing amount, the wage, or the marginal resource cost, is equal to the VMPL. Sometimes that's known as the hiring rule. Again, you could also say the MRC is equal to the VMPL, or the MRC is equal to the MRP for marginal revenue product. Those are all true. B, at the profit maximizing level of output, suppose the marginal product of the last worker hired is 20 towels per day. Calculate the price of a towel. So this kind of flips it a little bit from the usual method that we do this, from the usual order of things. So the marginal product, remember, times the price of the good is equal to the VMPL, which at the profit maximizing level of output is also equal to the wage. That's what we said just up here in the first part of the question. So what are we given here? We're given the marginal product, 20. The price is the variable. The market wage is $80 per day, which is equal to the value of the marginal product of labor at the profit maximizing output level. So we're just solving for, ignore this one, solving for X here. We get the price of the good is $4. Towels that are worth $4 will give us a value of the marginal product of labor of $80. $80 value of the marginal product equal to the wage is where the profit is maximized. Part C, draw a correctly labeled graph of the labor supply and demand curves for Pride Textiles and show the equilibrium amount of labor hired. This is basically what I did in the last problem. So quantity of labor, wage, supply of labor, demand for labor, and that equilibrium quantity. Since it doesn't even tell us the number of work, it doesn't give us enough numbers to put any more numbers on this other than this one right here. The wage rate is $80 per day. And that's it. That's all I want you to do. Then for part D, given your answer to part B, if the price of a towel increases, explain how Pride's profit maximizing quantity of labor will be affected. So the part about giving your answer to part B is not really all that significant. All you need to deal with is remember that if the price of a towel increases, that's one of those things that will increase the demand for labor, because if the price goes up, then the value of the marginal product for each worker goes up. And what it does is it shifts the demand for labor to the right, which increases the equilibrium quantity of labor hired. So we'd explain that by saying the increase in price leads to an increase in the value of the marginal product of labor for each worker. That's an increase in the firm's demand for labor, which increases the firm's profit maximizing quantity hired. Lastly, I'm going to do one problem with the concept of the supply for labor. So Andre Cummings, the production manager of Electric Designs, has asked his boss for a pay raise. His boss is concerned that if he increases Andre's salary, Andre might work less. In other words, Andre's boss is concerned that leisure is a normal good for Andre. I wouldn't even worry about this normal good piece. We can always assume that's the case. Just don't concern yourself with that concept. Just always assume that. Andre's boss is concerned that so remember with the supply of labor curve, now we're talking about the market as a whole, not just the firm. In the supply of labor curve, there is a portion of it that is upward sloping, which is due to the substitution effect. We're substituting income for leisure. And then there's a portion where it starts bending backwards as a result of the income effect, where as we gain more and more income, we can afford to work less and less. So therefore, back to his concern, if he increases Andre's salary, Andre might work less. That would be the case when you're above this W1 right here. If you increase if this is Andre's supply curve for labor, if he increases wage, he'll work a lower quantity of hours. So we're saying that the income effect is what's predominant, and out of these choices, that is what B says. The income effect might be greater than his substitution effect. Remember I said in class that both of these are kind of going on at the same time to some degree, but when it starts bending backwards is when the income effect is greater than the substitution effect. The one other kind of problem that you will see on supply and demand for labor in the market, say that say there's an influx of population, show how this affects the equilibrium wage rate in the market, as well as the equilibrium quantity of, or the profit maximizing quantity of workers hired by the firm. So an influx of population, as we talked about in class, will shift the supply for labor to the right. All other things equal, that will decrease the equilibrium wage in a perfectly competitive labor market. And remember, that is the wage that the firm takes. So if this is the firm, this is the market, then here's the first supply of labor 1. The new wage is the supply for labor 2. We're assuming all other things equal, demand stays constant, demand for labor by the firm. The value of the marginal product hasn't changed. So at a lower wage, the firm is actually going to hire more workers, increase the quantity of labor because you're increasing the profit maximizing quantity, where that point where supply equals demand. Yet another counterintuitive kind of conclusion: if we end up if we end up lowering the wage, then the firm ends up hiring more workers. But it kind of makes sense from the firm's perspective. If they have to pay each worker less, then they're able to hire more workers. We're assuming in all of this that we're in a market where they can find all the workers they need, whatever that market wage is. Okay, hope this is helpful. See you for the quiz, and good luck.